Welcome to the Wrestling Still Cold podcast. This is KM. And that is Mark.
How y'all doing?
So for this, let's call it Flashback Friday because this should be uploaded on Friday.
It's our retro review show.
Yeah. Definitely a retro review here because it's the very first Starrcade from the NWA. I don't believe it was WCW back then. From the NWA back in 1983. I wasn't even born yet.
I was about a little over 2 years from.
So, before we get into it, did you notice that they called it the Flair for the Gold?
Yes.
Why didn't they just spell it Flair like Ric Flair?
Well, it's marketing. I guess, as a flair, you know.
I thought it
was kind of decent. They're just trying to make it two ways into one and kill two birds with one stone, I guess.
No, I get that, but they didn't spell Flair the way they spell Ric Flair. That seemed like an easy take.
Well, I said that it's a flair, and then Ric Flair, Flair for the Gold, I guess.
Nah.
It was hot on the trot, I guess, as they say too.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. For me, marketing, let's spell it the same as the guy on the card.
Plus, they probably didn't want to be biased about it, tell you. That's my assumption.
Oh, that might be true. Although for bias with Ric Flair, they did come out of North Carolina at the Greensboro Coliseum with Bob Caudle, which, again, this is the second pay-per-view I saw with Bob on.
Yes, sir.
And Gordon Soley as the main commentators. A little remark about them. They definitely didn't. Maybe it's the style from back then, but they did not seem into it.
I think it's just more style, honestly. It's Gordon Soley's known, especially for back at that time frame, as the best announcer there was. That's actually JR's idol too. But yeah, Gordon Soley got the Hall of Fame. I think it's about 10 years later after that, if I'm not mistaken. Their announced team was a little different style, was not as rambunctious into it, but back then that's kind of the way commentating really was. How the style of it too.
Oh, that might be. It was just one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, you guys are bored, like.
I got you. It's different style. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So first up, now they just kind of jumped right into this.
No intro.
With no intro, no warning, and this can be found on the WWE Network. And if you want to plug it for $9.99, go for it.
No, that's not. I'm gonna leave the plug it. I didn't receive a check in the mail.
But on the network, I'm sitting here rewinding it, thinking, "Oh, did I just jump in the middle of this?" Nope, that's just how they just jumped right to it. The first match was the Masked Assassins, which whoever these guys are, versus Bugsy McGraw and Rufus R. Jones. You can definitely tell back then this style was being, doing dancing during the middle of the match because that's what Bugsy kept doing. But there was really nothing much to this match. I mean, Assassin, quick roll up for the win on Bugsy McGraw, and I don't even know if I really want to call this much of a match. Would you rate this?
I rated 3.5.
3.5.
It was athletic. Athleticism for what it was. It was not bad take for opening match. But it was different.
Very, very different, and we'll talk more about the styles from back then because there's a few that there wasn't a lot of variety to put it.
That's good basic way of kind of going about it.
Yeah.
I think the characters, some of them spoke a little louder than the in ring a little bit at times. No offense to the style back then at all.
Yeah, it's just, again, there was a weird trend in this, and we'll probably get to that later.
Yeah.
The next match was a tag team match. Johnny Weaver and Scott McGee, never heard of any of these two guys, versus Kevin Sullivan and Mark Lewin. Lewin pinned Weaver, and at the end, the heels healed up on Scott McGee and started cutting into the head and whatnot, a little bit of blood and whatnot after the match. I actually found the beatdown a little bit more interesting than the match itself, but would you rate it?
I gave it a 4.
Gave it a 4?
I thought that beatdown at the end was interesting too.
Yeah. I gave more points for that, and actually, I don't know if I said this. I rated the last match a 3. I gave this one a 4.
Okay. That beating at the end has a lot of blood loss.
Yeah. The blood stained the mat throughout the rest of the night.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I wonder if Ric Flair was calling gimmick infringement about the guy bleeding, because that seems to be Ric Flair's main thing. He likes to get his hair all from bleached blonde to bright red. Then we have after this, we have a young Tony Schiavone. He probably is in his 20s at this point. Tony Schiavone interviewing Harley Race in the back. This is not anything we're going to rate, but it's one of those where you could definitely tell that Harley was an old school promo guy. It wasn't bad by any means. It's something that you can see get carried over into the 90s, where it's like we watched an old WCW pay-per-view with no, not WCW, WWF with Macho Man, and you could definitely see the similarities.
Yeah. That, by the way, that's in the archives, and you can see that on YouTube and SoundCloud and so forth too.
Right. The next match ended up being Carlos Colon versus Abdullah the Butcher. Carlos Colon, is this the same guy that's Carlito's dad?
Yep, Carlito Primo's daddy.
That's what I thought. So in the middle of the match, you see in the beginning of the match, you see Abdullah pull something from his gear and start hitting Carlos with it. But anyway, Carlos gets a hold of it, starts using it on Abdullah himself. Someone from the outside, Hugo, I didn't catch the last name, broke up a figure 4 that Colon had put on Abdullah the Butcher, breaking the lock, and eventually Abdullah made the pin. Would you give this one?
I get a 6.5. I was interested in a lot of the action. Abdullah, I've seen a lot of his matches over time, and he usually has. He's obviously, it's his character in him. He's a pretty violent person, as he's known all across the wrestling world. He's a legendary wrestler, but he was always known as more violent. And I wasn't expecting anything less in this match, and I thought it was that object. I couldn't catch what it was when I seen that, but
I couldn't either. It looked like a rod.
That could have been what it was, absolutely. I thought it was interesting for that, and not bad skills in the ring. So yeah, I definitely thought it was 6.5 was a fair number.
Yeah, I gave it a 6. I didn't know much about Abdullah before this. Never seen any of his stuff. Okay. It did spark my interest with Carlos Colon. I did get more interested in the fact that they started the story early on with basically Carlos trying to get a hold of whatever Abdullah was trying to use on him and use it on the guy.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting. Then there was another backstage segment with Tony Schiavone with Weaver and McGee. A little bit of a promo talking about the beatdown that they received. And there's one thing I picked up on that I don't know if you picked up on. Weaver kept looking to the side of the camera like he was reading a cue card during this portion.
I didn't catch that one, actually. No, I didn't really notice that. I guess I was actually looking at his partner more off.
Yeah,
what there was, honestly. And
well, it drew my attention. I'm like, are you reading something?
Usually back then, they didn't really do. I mean, a whole lot of what reading off scripts or anything. But maybe he just needed a little assistance. Maybe
he has someone to stand there with a cue card to give him an idea what he's supposed to talk about. The next match was Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood versus Dick Slater and Bob Orton. Orton and Slater did a lot of heel work on this match, but Orton hit the superplex and pinned Youngblood. And then McDaniel did attempt to attack after the match. What did you think of this one?
I thought it was pretty good. it was showed some good storytelling and good heel act. Bob Orton's one of the better heels in the business. That's obviously daddy to Randy Orton, and I thought it was really good for what it was. And I've heard, I watched a few matches a long time ago. Wahoo McDaniel, and yeah, I did a lot of great words about him. So I was excited to see him in the ring, and he has some good matches in the past. But I gave it 6.5.
Okay, I gave it a 6. I dug Bob Orton's work. I did see the similarities between him and Randy. I do think Randy's a better heel because I just think Randy comes across as evil person.
And you see that suplex that Bob Orton uses. That's that trademark Orton suplex. Same thing that Orton uses.
Yeah. But either way, when it comes to Orton, though, Randy, that is, I usually look for more of his snap power slams and things like that. He has a very, very sick-looking power slam.
Oh, yeah.
But then we get Tony Schiavone backstage with Ric Flair, which, I'm sorry, this was a very tame Ric Flair. I prefer the I'm going nuts and I'm definitely on some coke Ric Flair.
Yeah, I know. He was different back in his earlier prime.
I did not like this tame Ric Flair. I want to see Ric Flair trying to drop an elbow on his jacket, stripping down to his clothes.
That came later on there, and that kind give it a few more years, and he kind of went a little more different, enhanced his character a few more years on down the road. But
yeah. I definitely was watching this. I'm like, this got to be before Coke, Ric Flair.
Or drink too much. It's just like,
well, there's a long-standing joke. Long-standing joke and somewhat reports that a lot of wrestlers were using Coke back in the 80s. And I'm wondering if that's what caused Ric Flair to become who he is now. So the next match was Charlie Brown from Out of Town versus Kabuki. Kabuki had a very interesting ring attire to come to the ring in. Do you know anything about this Charlie Brown from Out of Town guy?
No, I don't, but I dug it.
I liked it. No, don't get me wrong. I liked the match.
I never heard of him, ever seen him before, and nothing. But I was like, man, this is pretty dang cool. The way his in the ring was, his character, even the mask, the ordeal, and everything. I was entertained by his just character, just in general. I kind of laughed when I heard Charlie Brown was, taking the cartoon. But I didn't know anything about Charlie Brown until now, and I thought he was pretty cool.
Yeah. He ended up winning via pinfall after an elbow drop. What'd you end up rating this?
6.3.
I gave it a 6. It almost got a 7 out of me, and this is the only reason I bumped it down to a 6. I did not hear anything about this 15-minute time limit until after the match was over. Then there was this, if it's not within the 15 minutes, Charlie Brown doesn't get the TV title, but he gets to keep his mask. I didn't hear that stipulation. I just heard it was title versus mask.
I heard, I think it's about halfway through, or maybe close to that, they had mentioned something about it, and I was looking. I didn't know the story behind it, so I was not in loop of what was really going on with that. But I was more involved in the match character, honestly, more than anything else. But I was in. I didn't. That stipulation was a little something different.
Right. Then there was 2 backstage segments, one with Harley Race and the other one with Dusty Rhodes. The Dusty Rhodes one was having audio issues. And that's another thing that plagued this pay-per-view is audio issues.
Yeah.
Going in and out. I think in the Charlie Brown match, it happened as well because they're starting to say something after they came to the ring and then the mic cut off. So that did not help the pay-per-view at all. And I'm actually surprised. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Was it about the audio issues?
Yeah, I was saying time you miss a Dusty interview. You missed that. He was a hell of a mic guy, but that's all I was gonna say.
Yeah, that's like the worst person to have a mic cut out on is Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.